For us, the NIP, we have a mandate towards the public patients. So most of our sample come from public hospitals and clinics, but that does not limit us from testing private patients as well. So we test everyone, and our main sample type that we would get for TB, you would mostly, when you go to the hospital, they would ask you to cough. So it would be your sputum or mucus. That's the one that they would send to us. Whenever they ask you, they'll give you a cup, and then you cough in it, and then they will take it, they give it to us. And then us now, we do our manipulations, we have good technologies, and then we would see if there's TB in that sample or not.
Okay.
But yeah, in these days, because TB is not only in the lungs, it can be any other part of the body, they are also allowed to collect any other sample other than sputum. For example, urine, we do get those. We have tissues and your pleural fluids, or the fluids that you get from your lungs, or any other part, and then we test for TB.
Okay.
Yeah.
When these samples are sent to NIP, it means hospitals do not have internal capacity to do this on their own, or is it at an elevated level? Why would the hospital send it to NIP?
No, the hospital, it's not in their mandate to test sample.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a little bit outside of their scope.
Okay.
You need trained professionals where we come in, and these people are usually in the laboratory, in the lab. So yes, the labs, we do have labs at almost all the public hospitals in Namibia, but it still has to be a medical scientist like I am that has to test for that sample. It's not like they don't have capacity, it's usually because it's outside their scope.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where we come in.
Yeah. What is the turnaround time? Because typically someone is sick, they need very urgent interventions. How often do you return the results?
Okay, we have different turnaround time, obviously, based on different tests that we do. Blood has a much faster turnaround time. For TB, we have some technologies that allows us to do our manipulation and get a result for at least within 2 hours. But then we need time. We need to account for the time it takes for the sample to get from the clinicians to the lab. Usually some of these samples, they are from far to reach clinics, for example, or they are in the hospital, but they're still at distance. So what we inform our client is that we give them, for TB specific test, we give them 48 hours. Yeah, so that we can give them a test. Although the actual testing process, usually it's much less than that. And then we are able to get the results in a much shorter period of time. So if the patient it's a very urgent sample, and then the patient needs results immediately within an hour, for example, we always encourage our clinicians to always just call and reach out to the laboratory and be like, look, I've sent this sample. It's very urgent. This patient is critical. Will you be able to do this manipulation immediately? And we'll be able to do so. That's also not to say that we neglect any samples or routine samples that do not have special requests. No, we also attend them on time. We just give ourselves a specified amount of time of 48 hours to make sure that we have enough time to do all our procedures and verify the results, so that when you get it, you are absolutely certain that it's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where does TB come from? I mean, typically, where does it originate from?
Well, TB is one of the very oldest, diseases in the world. It's caused by a bacteria called Mycobacterium tuberculosis, although there is a group of them that causes them. So in the microbiology, in the field of microbiology, where we're coming from, we would say TB is one of the very good bacteria in such a case that TB is able to hide itself in your system, and usually it does not kill until it has to. So that makes it's able to survive in the host for a very long time. That's why it makes it a very good bacteria, and it makes it very difficult to treat. TB has been reported in the times of the Egyptian mummies. They've discovered it then already, and we still are faced with the same challenges of TB, right? But usually, like with the TB, it's because it's a bacteria, usually causes lung infection or a respiratory infection. It's very easily transmissible between the two people, like me and you now. We are in very close proximity. So
I hope you're immune.
Yeah, I hope so too.
You deal with these things all the time. So.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hope so too. So when two people are in close proximity or in an environment where there's very poor ventilation and the infected person coughs, this TB is usually now in the droplets, in the saliva, Yeah, so it can also survive on surfaces, although not for too long. So you can easily like carry it and then carry it, and then you can get an infection.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how it normally spread from person to person. It's infectious and it's spread through the air or droplets in the air. Yeah.
Is it a disease that is influenced by socioeconomic conditions? For example, I know, for example, that what was the disease that was the one that comes from contaminated water?
Cholera. Is it one of them is
no,
cholera? Any of the diarrhea conditions?
Yeah, I can't remember the name now.
Or is it HPV? No, sorry, not HPV. Hepatitis E. There was a hepatitis E outbreak.
Yeah, hepatitis. Yes. That one, because that one was prevalent in areas. In Windhoek, it was confined to your informal settlements where there's no proper sanitation and stuff like that. So TB, is it similar? Does it come from those kind of conditions, or it can also be prevalent in your leafy suburbs?
Okay. No, you're right. There is a correlation of TB and the socioeconomic status. Yeah, it has been like the other diseases, mostly confined in the people with poor hygiene, low living standards, whereby there is no proper ventilation and overcrowding. Overcrowding is a problem, which is usually a problem of people of low socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
Right. So so it can easily be spread there, and also hygiene and food or nutritious food intake. Right. People who are likely, people who have less are likely to have poor poor food or dietary requirements that is required, likely to live in an environment that is not properly ventilated and overcrowded. And then they are likely also not to access medical care and stuff. So yeah, it does influence the spread of TB in that community compared to people that are much better off, that are able to segregate themselves in their dwelling, in their houses, because there's enough space. And also the statistics, if you look at the WHO statistics, we see that the high burden for TB is mostly in low-income countries like Namibia, while the European countries and the much more well-off, they seemingly doing well. They are able to curb it and then the spread and then to treat it much better. So yeah, socioeconomic status does influence the TB spread.
Absolutely. How prevalent is it in Namibia in general?
Okay, so if I say numbers, might not make sense, right? Because So, but what I would want to say is that TB in Namibia, in particular, have been classified by the WHO, or it's ranked as number 11 in the whole world, not in Africa. Not in Africa, in the whole world, we are classified 11 with one of the countries with the highest TB burdens.
Wow,
we used to be worse off than that. We used to be, I think the lowest was, more recently we're at 8. I think previously in the early 2010s, we were like around 5. That means, yes, TB prevalence in Namibia is very high. So usually what the WHO does, that the top 10 countries are considered obviously high burden country. Since now we just moved up a space above, we are now at 11th position. We are still high burden, although not danger, but we are still on the watch list. So yeah, but it means that Namibian prevalence is still high. But also to make it worse is that we still estimate that there are about 38 potential TB cases that we are missing in Namibia, right? So if we're able to diagnose and identify all the potential cases that we have, I'm sure our burden would be much higher, than what we currently are. But as it stands, we're not doing so well. Our burden is really high.
I suppose your visit here as an official of the party is mostly because of the relations, these historic relations between SWAPO and the ANC. If you can walk us through the context of that relationship.
Thank you very much, Toivo, and good evening to your viewers. Thanks for inviting us. Indeed, we've been here, not only now, but we've been in Namibia at a time when Namibia was preparing for its own first democratic elections 35 years ago. And therefore, coming here is again a demonstration of our solid relationship of the two countries, given their commonalities with regard to the historical colonization of both. That time it was not even Namibia, Southwest Africa, as well as South Africa, and out of our common form of oppression and exploitation, the two liberation movements found it very important to interact, not only for the freedom of our individual countries, but for the freedom of all oppressed and colonized nations in the region of SADC, in the front line then, as well as throughout the continent. And because of how our forebears were able, even during the time of illegality when they were banned, to establish the relationship outside of their countries of origin, solidarity between the two became very strong because we're all fighting a common enemy. We are also told by those who came before us that there was not only solidarity, but sharing of resources for freedom, sharing of resources to fight the enemy, sharing of communication platforms, even at the level of the United Nations, before we gained our independence and before SWAPO gained its own independence. The ANC, together with SWAPO and many other liberation movements, also enjoyed the support and solidarity of other peace-loving nations, such as the people of Palestine, whilst they were living under the treacherous conditions of the undermining of their rights by the apartheid Israeli government. But they stood with us. The Cuban people housed and developed young people of Namibia, of South Africa, of Zimbabwe in the island of youth, and together they worked. The very president, who's the commander-in-chief today here in Namibia, worked with many, including Comrade Thabo Mbeki, Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and many others on the international front when she was the chief rep of SWAPO then, because chief reps were alternative ambassadors of their countries and representing the liberation movements. She worked tirelessly with many of us and many others. President Sam Nujoma, may his soul rest in peace, was one of those who championed the ushering of democracy here in Namibia. The ANC then were even not unbanned under the United Democratic Front, which was a mass democratic movement. We came here, we brought transport, we came here to help mobilize for elections because we believed that the freedom of Namibia was our freedom. And hence, if you fast forward today, we were not just here for the inauguration and celebrating the successful appointment progressive of the cabinet collective of 14 women and 11 males, but also to celebrate the 35th anniversary of Namibia. We were here during the elections. We were here as observers. We were here to defend our hard-won gains. And I keep saying our because these freedoms of the Namibians are the freedoms of South Africans and the people of Africa against the regime change agenda we saw actually showing up in many other countries, but Namibians were able to actually defend themselves. So we have a very rich history together. We went together to the Beijing Women's Conference. Comrade Nandi, the commander-in-chief, who's now the president, was part of the key people who were facilitating there in China at the Beijing Women's Conference. And in her lifetime, we celebrate the realization of some of the objectives of the Beijing Women's Conference. And for that, we are quite grateful that the people of Namibia are solid on the course for the liberation and emancipation of women. And finally, we are also here to learn lessons. Lessons about being principled on the role of women. Secondly, committed towards the development of women, because she didn't just rise as a woman. It is the movement SWAPO, it is the government SWAPO, it is the people of Namibia who actually nurtured her, who actually made her to be who she is, and who, when her name was raised, they never actually saw her as just a woman. They knew this is a freedom fighter, this is a doer, this is a public servant, this is a mother, this is a leader beyond just being a woman. And therefore, she's a symbol of the advancement of the struggle for justice and humanity, and the rights of women. And we all are quite happy. We all are looking forward that it shall happen in our lifetime, that the African National Congress, South African government, and throughout the SADC, because there shall be women who lead, because even in SADC, she's the first woman to be elected. We do understand the Tanzanian situation, but it was an appointment because of what the unfortunate situation. Comrade Nandi has been elected, and the good thing is that she went into the inauguration with SWAPO having endorsed her as the president. And it's a good lesson. It's a lesson for all the parties. We'll be hosting the Liberation Summit, the meeting of the liberation movements in South Africa. And one of the discussions would be about the journey towards the emancipation of women and gender equality.
Absolutely.
So Lucas is a film we produced last year. It was produced with support from the German embassy. Actually, the shooting was in 2023, but the release was last year in 2024. It's a story about street kids. So what we did is that we interviewed some children living and working in the streets, or having lived in the streets in Windhoek, to get their testimonies, to find out who they were, where they were coming from, what was their experiences in the streets. And based on those testimonies, Miki Rose-Garoes wrote the script. She did a brilliant job, I think. And the script follows the story of Lucas, a young boy of 12, who, because of what is happening at his home, ended up being in the streets. It's a fiction, but it's a fiction based on real stories. And Lucas was used quite extensively last year in schools and in communities to raise a little bit of awareness about street kids. Because, when you see a street kid, sometimes your first reaction is, oh God, they will again ask me $1. Or then it is, should I give $1 or should I not give $1? We don't always know how to approach them, but we sort of forget that there is a story behind. No child wants to be in the streets. And I think Lucas sort of gave a little bit of a voice to those street kids. And I know that for myself, whenever now I see someone begging at the robot or in the streets, my first thought is, okay, what is your story? How did you end up here? And so Lucas, I think, has this element that is quite emotional because we can relate to that kid. And it has had quite a bit of a success locally, but also internationally. The latest one is that we've been nominated for the AMVC Award in Nigeria and Africa Magic's Viewers Award Choice. I think I said it in the wrong way. I think it's Africa Magic Viewer Choice Award in Nigeria in the best indigenous language, because it's not really in English. It's a mixture between Kwekwegowab and Afrikaans.
Very interesting.
So we are very excited about it. Previously, it has won the Best Youngest African Actor for the little kid Alejandro, who is playing Lucas. That was also very exciting. It has won Best Movie in Mauritius. It has been well received internationally, particularly in Africa, I have to say.
Excellent.
And that's something that I'm very proud of.
I can imagine. Tell us a bit about this young actor who has shot to fame now, Alejandro.
Sure. So as much as we did the script with real kids living in the street, we didn't feel it to be appropriate to have them as actors. Also, it's quite difficult from a logistic point of view. So we did auditions in schools. And we wanted to get kids a chance to act and a chance to experience being on a set and on a movie. So we visited various schools and, we auditioned a lot of kids. And some of the kids were better than others. And then from selection to selection, we found Alejandro. Back in the day when we did the shooting, it was in grade 6. That actually quite amazing because there was a lot of scenes,
Yeah.
a lot of lines to learn. And I think this kid did amazing. And he was very involved in the story. He really wanted to tell the best story possible. I think he loved the experience. And he really gave his all to the shooting, which was quite fascinating to see.
It's incredible. But also the story you are telling is one that really needs telling. But you're quite an old hand at doing that, especially with your organization. Tell us a bit more about OYO and how it started and what its purpose is.
Sure. So as a bigger organization, not just for the film, as a bigger organization, our objective is to use art to create a social awareness.
Okay.
So we have different projects from dance to film to comic books or publications or photo exhibitions. We use different medium. And the idea of using different medium is that we can go back several times to the same schools, talking about the same topic, but not repeating ourselves.
Yes.
And you know, kids get very bored very quickly. So it's more exciting one day you go and see a dance, and then the next day you go and see a movie, and then the following day you read a magazine. So it keeps the interest going.
Yes.
It's reinforcing the message without being boring in any way. And we use art because we believe that the arts appeal to your emotions. You know, training, conferences, workshops that appeal to your intellect.
Yes.
You reflect on figures, you reflect on something that is presented to you. But it's not emotional, it's quite detached.
Yes,
you know, if you see a percentage, there are so many street kids in Windhoek. Okay, there's so many street kids in Windhoek, so what? But if you see a movie or if you see a dance piece or a photo exhibition, it touches you.
Yes.
And then if it touches you, you're more likely to react and to pay attention to the topic, but also ultimately to change your attitude or to change your behavior.
Yes, yes. And so importantly to remember that it's a person.
Exactly. In the case of Lucas, it's a child that is in the street, and that could be anybody's child, really. We did other movies also with a social meaning, like Kukuri was about child marriage. We tend to forget that in some places in Namibia, we still have traditional marriages, and we still have kids under 18 that are traditionally getting married. So the idea of Kukuri was to give a voice to those kids who are 15, 16, and sort of forced under the banner of it's my culture, it's my tradition, to be married.
Yes, yes.
We did Kapana about LGBTQI plus rights at a time when most of those rights were still not met. So yeah, we try to give a voice to people, and we try to remind people that it's not a street kid, it's a person. It's not just a gay or lesbian, it's a person. It's not just a married child, it's a person. And I think once we put that into perspective, people react differently.
Yes, yes. And it's so important to use the arts to educate and inform and to change people's minds. Tell us a bit more about the various other shows that you've got going on, dance. That's the one that always sticks in my head. But I'm sure you guys are always very busy.
Yeah, well, I mean, this year we've been a little bit less busy because we lost some of our funding because of the global politics.
Yes.
But overall, we are trying to be as busy as possible. And yeah, beside the film, I think what OYO is mostly well known for is our dance troupe. We got the first and still up to date only dance troupe in Namibia that is employing dancers as full-time performers.
Wow.
And we create with them pieces of what we call physical theater. So it's really the telling of a story, but with no word. So it's like a piece of theater, if you want, but instead of people talking, they are moving.
Yes.
And through the movement, we still understand the conversations and what is going on, but it does not use any language. So you can show it from Zambezi to Luderitz. Everybody will understand what is happening. Exactly. Dance is fairly universal. And again, the idea is the same, is to tell stories that will touch people, like we did in Neville on a boy child being abused by his stepfather. We have another party with Helen about the consequence of abusing alcohol and jealousy. So we have different pieces, and they all talk about a special issue. But again, the idea is to put the audience in the shoes of the character. And when we present the dance, we don't just go and dance, but we then have a discussion with the audience. And we often ask them, okay, if you were in the shoes of this character, would you have done the same? Would you have done something different? What else could you have done? Or what differently?
Yes, yes.
How differently could you have done it? So we also engage the audience, that they just are not a passive recipient, but they actually are an active audience.
Okay.